What helps curiosity grow? What shuts it down? Why do some environments make it easier to feel creative, clear, and open? What happens when there is less pressure and more space? How do community, nature, and embodiment support curiosity in real life?
Thanks for joining us today at the Healing Medicine Podcast. Who are you listening to? I am Dr. Jessie Mahoney, and my co-host is Dr. Ni-Cheng Liang. We are two board-certified physicians who bring decades of experience to the conversation about wellness. If you crave more ease and aspire to rediscover your love for medicine and life, one mindful step at a time, you are in the right place. We hope you'll love today's episode, and if so, please share it. A reminder that nothing in our podcast is medical advice. Today's episode is for you if you have been so focused on what's expected of you and what you're supposed to do that you've lost track of what you actually love to do. If you're in a season of figuring out what's next in your career, your life, wherever, and the answers aren't coming. If you know you want something different, but every time you try to think about it, your brain spirals into logistics. If you've forgotten what it feels like to be genuinely curious about your own life, not necessarily solving a problem or optimizing, but wondering what might be possible. And lastly, if someone asked you recently what you want and you honestly had no idea.
So, the Connected Nature retreat that Jessie and I are going to be co-leading this summer is specifically designed for this. The entire experiential process that participants are engaged in is a catalyst for curiosity, creativity, and spaciousness. And it is coming up very soon this summer at the end of July to August during Jessie's birthday. So we hope that you will consider joining us.
Welcome to today's episode. What do you actually want? Biohacking curiosity. Today, Ni-Cheng and I are going to share something that I have been exploring in my transition well small group coaching. It is also part of our strategic planning behind our retreats. And whether you join us at Connect in Nature or in Nicasio, thinking about how to show up with curiosity is critically important. It matters much more than we realize. Curiosity affects how we learn. It affects how we navigate change, solve problems, and how we connect with ourselves and others. For most adults, especially physicians, curiosity gets pushed out of the way by pressure, productivity, perfectionism, and the feeling that you should already know the answer. Curiosity does not grow well under pressure. It grows in the right conditions. And those conditions aren't random. There are real causes and conditions that support curiosity. Certain environments, certain rhythms, certain relationships, and certain practices make curiosity more likely. Others make it much harder. So when you step into an environment designed to support your curiosity, creativity, clarity, connection, it's easier to access these qualities. And these specifics of this are not the same for all of us, but there are clues. So today we're going to talk about some clues, and we hope that this episode helps you think about what supports curiosity in your own life and how you might create more of these kinds of conditions.
Curiosity absolutely has causes and conditions. It's not something that one can force upon another person or upon yourself. Like if you reckon back to uh, a boring class that you were in, a boring lecture, or reading a boring book. If it didn't interest you, like you weren't going to try to force yourself to get curious about it. In fact, trying to do that might have had the opposite effect. Like it just turned you off from even trying to absorb any of the content that you found boring and uninteresting. So, curiosity ultimately is something that we can very intentionally support, cultivate, and ultimately practice. And when curiosity arises, it does depend on the context. It depends on where we are in the environment, it depends on who we're around, it depends on the level of time crunch pressures that might exist. It depends on how our nervous systems are showing up as well. So it depends on a whole lot of different circumstances. So I wanted to ask all of you, dear listeners, some of these questions, and we're going to have other reflection questions in the end of the episode, as always. But these reflection questions are to get you curious about getting curious. So, who are you usually with when you feel curious? What are you doing? Where are you? Why does that setting help? And how do you know that curiosity is present?
So for me, I'm with friends usually, or I'm in nature, or I'm practicing yoga or teaching yoga. The time of day for me that I'm most curious is absolutely the early morning. It's usually when it's a sunny day and potentially when I'm rested. I won't say potentially, always when I'm rested. I'm not very curious when I'm tired. Traveling makes me more curious. Chatting, friends' walks make me more curious. Journaling. And for me, a particular thing that makes me curious is I actually like to read my journal at some point. But I have this practice of I only look at it on airplanes. And so it gives me a chance to sort of look at my life between the last airplane I was on. And sometimes that's close together and sometimes it's far apart. And I actually, as many of you know, I still get coached and I put all my coaching notes in my journal too. And what I find really cool is many of the things I put in there are things I've already done, but it makes me really curious about what I want to do next. It just opens up your mind in this way. So I call it my airplane check. And part of why I love it is that you're in a bubble, right? Unless you hook your phone up to the plane, no one can reach you. You don't know anybody. And so it's this great opportunity to be curious about yourself in I was going to say a quiet moment, but an airplane's not actually quiet, but a non-distracted moment.
And you can journal while you're on the airplane too.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of overlap with you, Jessie, in terms of the causes and conditions that help upregulate my curiosity. Definitely being with friends, my children when they are not fighting, not throwing a tantrum, like when they're peaceful, family members, basically people that I trust very deeply, that I feel comfortable being vulnerable around, where there's unconditional support already there. Also quiet. So quiet meaning no noises that are caused by really modern technology. So other things include similarly upregulation of the parasympathetic nervous system, nature, of course, and many of you, dear listeners, know that I am an avid paddler. So paddling and that repetitive movement of my body is very meditative. I'm also outside when I'm paddling. So I'm on the ocean or on the bay or in a lake in a river. Also being around trees and mountains and of course the beach and the sand. Closer to home, I find a very accessible place for spaciousness on my deck, looking out on mission trails. And then also reading a book that is really highly entertaining and creative, and usually it's fiction. So that kind of helps to upregulate my sense of curiosity as well. Other meditative movements besides yoga also include walking and hiking. So I know when curiosity is present by a sense of what is happening to my body and also my emotions. So there's a feeling of contentment, there's peace, there's calm, there's happiness. Sometimes there's a eureka moment, like I notice something in nature and it reminds me of something else that's usually like a metaphor for life or a passage in a book. There's a eureka moment. And then this desire to want to go deeper, like getting into the details of whatever I just noticed, like pretty quickly. There's a little bit of a joyful, giddy urgency to wanting to go deeper. And then oftentimes, how that manifests is there's a line of text or a poem or an image that I want to expand upon or include on an essay or a poem that I'm working out in my head, for instance. And sometimes I actually do need to write it down like very quickly because I'm afraid it's going to be forgotten. Often, or not often, but sometimes I would say sometimes, even a tune, so a melody has shown up when I start getting curious and I want to write that line of music out, which is pretty hilarious because I have to actually draw a musical staff and try to draw like 5 straight lines and try to put the notes in so I can go back to it and play it on the piano later on. What about you, Jessie?
So for me, it's excitement, enthusiasm, and I'm energetic. I feel just engaged, alive, awake. Um, as I was hearing you talk, it also occurred to me that I have a similar sense, which I sometimes frame as negative, but urgent. Like I have to go do it, but from a place of like, just, I don't want to be distracted. And I'm so engaged and excited. So it's interesting because urgency can be a negative, but it can also be a positive. And you mentioned the somatic sense. And for me, it's actually not the calm and peaceful. It's the sort of excited aliveness. And it's somewhat of an emotion, but it's also very much a somatic sense of what you feel in your body. And I think it's important to notice both because that might give you clues of how you can put yourselves in spaces where you feel more curious. And so it is less about the effort and more about the setup. And what we've covered here is really like the who, what, where, when, how does curiosity work for you specifically? And one other thing to bring up here, which I think we both alluded to but didn't say, was safety. A sense of nervous system regulation and not being threatened and not being in fight or flight. And so it's similar to sort of the prerequisites for coaching in general, and curiosity is, of course, part of that. But you have to feel that you're in a safe space, a non-judgmental space to feel curious. And so that I would also add to the list of important necessities. So on the contrary to that, what gets in the way of curiosity? Because there are things that tend to narrow your vision or squash like an elephant on top of your curiosity. And that might be urgency from outside, something that is pressuring you, being overscheduled, having no place to think, feeling perfectionist, feeling judged, thinking a lot of these things are what we feel regularly in our medical practices or in our lives in general. Maybe a fear of getting it wrong, wanting an immediate outcome or wanting a specific outcome, thinking about there being a right way and a wrong way. All of these thought patterns are the opposite of curiosity. Being tired, I mentioned, I'm never curious when I'm tired. And that's the energy balance. So paying attention to that. And then environments that feel rigid or claustrophobic or performative, when you feel annoyed, or that something shouldn't be that way, we rarely feel curious.
Yeah, and that relates to the rules and regulations that might come up in different environments that you find yourself in, whether it be in medicine or in life in general, often feel annoying, as you had mentioned. They sometimes feel extraneous, like, I don't think that rule is necessary. They can feel suffocating. I want to speak to the industrialization of medicine because it's actually pretty preposterous the way that clinic is set up, that there's a set amount of time for each patient, regardless of the complexity of the patient. And I think that's a huge disservice, not only to the patient, but also the clinician. And your curiosity absolutely can dampen because you're already running late. You're concerned that the next patient is already annoyed at you because you're running late. You're concerned that the patient who's in front of you is feeling like you're not giving them enough time for the visit. So there's a lot of seemingly constraining factors in that patient encounter. And ultimately, like through it all, we're supposed to tap into our curiosity as healers to really figure out what's going on and try to help someone, but within the same amount of time for everyone, regardless of how complex that person is. And so noticing in the specific environments where you are feeling rushed, judged, and trying to be efficient all the time, how that narrows your scope, decreases spaciousness, and ultimately cramps your curiosity. I think what we're trying to say also is that curiosity absolutely needs room, not just like physical spaciousness, but also like time spaciousness too.
Yeah. And so curiosity is not is physical and it's outside you. And so thinking about it as a physical quality, not just an intellectual quality, can give you more insight into how you can tap into it and how you can set yourself up to show up more curiously. For many people, curiosity is feeling more open. There's breathing room. It's less tight, it's more spacious. There's maybe more energy. Maybe there's movement in your body, maybe there's color, maybe it's as I mentioned, just sort of the energy, engaged, alive feeling. Curiosity, we don't have curiosity when we don't feel alive. And getting back to, again, safety, but not just safety in your brain about is this safe, but physicality of safety. So our invitation here is to ask you how curiosity feels in your body. And how does that differ from your baseline?
For me, it's a gentle absence of tension. My chest is open, my back is supported and upright. I feel like all of my senses are heightened. I'm more attuned, I'm more astute, but not in like a nervous energy type way, in a much more that I'm noticing way.
As you said that, I sat up taller. So curiosity feels like sitting up taller, breathing more deeply, able to breathe more deeply, but also able to enjoy that breath. And then there's a sense for me of flow, which is like not blockages. It's sort of tingly and spacious. So it's interesting because I think we all use different words and it doesn't matter. Just know what it feels like for you. This is an individualized suggestion.
And what we practice grows. So this is an invitation for a micro practice, one that I have already shared with all of you before, and that is to take a walk. Sometime this week, we invite you to take a walk, one where you're not listening to a podcast, one where you're not scrolling your phone, one where you're not actively trying to multitask, simply walking, no music, simply walking, noticing the support of the ground beneath your feet, noticing the sensations of body movement as you're walking. And if you needed specific attention of focus, you can notice the feet, the sensation of the feet as you're walking. And so noticing what shows up when there is no external additional inputs, nothing else competing for your attention. And then noticing where you went on that walk. Like, where did your thoughts go? Where did you go? Like, where did your feet take you? And so that leads into our next session about what kind of environments support curiosity. There are definitely environments that are more conducive to upregulating curiosity for us as humans, like nature, quiet, beautiful things, particularly in nature. Color, a lack of pressure, less noise, moving at a slower pace, being in an environment that is around you and happening at a slower pace, the allowance and permission for imperfection, and ultimately an unconditionally supportive community.
And pointing out that that is the opposite of the environment that most of us work in healthcare, in a clinic or a hospital, save a few. And for me, one environment specifically is an open window and fresh air. And I have spoken with many in healthcare who crave windows that open. And art is another one, I think, that can really help, or photos of people that you love. So it's not just being with them, but those are things you could bring into a hospital or clinic setting, your office, and that could change your availability and openness towards being curious.
It reminds me of our podcast on optimal healing environments when we had the interior designer come and be interviewed. Yeah.
Yes.
And I also shared then, and I'll share with all of you today, that well, now it's not so new, but the new clinic space that I'm working out of at Coastal Pulmonary Associates in Encinitas use the optimal healing environment philosophy to basically design that space. So I was able to hand pick fixtures, the coloring, how offices were set up. And I brought in a lot of nature very specifically. And the color scheme was really colors of the earth, but more muted, and bringing in the elements. So there was a wood element. There are stones and wood, for instance, to name a few of the aspects. And I take a lot of pride in having had such a big hand in creating that optimal healing environment, making sure every clinician has a standing desk as well. And then furthermore, in my clinic office, my own private clinic office, I have pictures of my family basically like in a row on my desk, and also artwork created by my kids and their classes, as well as photos of nature. So you can also choose to create your optimal healing environment that is conducive to spaciousness and your own upregulation of curiosity and creativity.
We could call it the optimal curiosity environment. The episode you're referring to is episode 86, which is How to Responsibly Create Nourishing Spaces with Jennifer Downing. And it was a really fun episode. We don't often have interior designers on our show. And yet, does space and environment contribute to healing? And today we're talking about how does space and environment contribute to curiosity?
So I wanted to share with you two spaces where curiosity was a very central intention. And this happened during cancer survivorship when I had taken time off to heal, basically, and I was going through chemo and surgeries. So I went to art therapy through the cancer center, and I also went to a creative writing group through a different cancer center. Also, there's data about singing and also singing in community. And by the way, as a pulmonologist, singing is great for your lungs in terms of lung capacity. Play is another one. We've also touched upon play in several of our podcast episodes as well. Listening to music, not just singing and creating music, being playful and experimenting with creativity, different mediums of art and expression. And then recognizing that with creativity, we really don't need it to be polished. Like, we don't have to set the intention that like this is going to be a famous piece of artwork or music or writing. It can be created simply just for us, for the sake of creation and exploring our curiosity without the fear of judgment. Like, who are you creating it for? Yourself. And maybe if during the process something inspires you to create it for someone else, that's fine. But like in the beginning, why don't you simply try to create and get curious for yourself? So unstructured time can often be helpful for this type of creativity cultivation. The effervescent white space of unscheduled time, like schedule your white space, time away from constant input. In the 21st century, there is an abundance of ongoing data, both true and false and everything in between, too easily accessible and many times unwelcome. So you can be very intentional about your data inputs during your creative and curiosity time. The other aspect that can help cultivate curiosity is intentional conversations with people who are open and also exploratory. So we do a mindful communication exercise at the Connected Nature retreat that is taught in the mindful practice curriculum originally designed by Drs. McCrasner and Ron Epstein.
And the play episode, we actually had a phenomenal episode a long time ago with Dr. Brooke Buckley about play being essential for adults too. That's episode 52. If any of you want to go back in the treasure troves of episodes, it's a good one.
We were connecting in those episodes, right? The episodes with the interior designer, the episode with Dr. Buckley, the episodes really highlight how connection can grow curiosity, because curiosity doesn't necessarily have to grow within one person. It oftentimes can grow into something that was not conceived by either person or individuals in a group alone. It can be an expander. So with the right conversation, the right community, the right room, it can change what's possible. I've seen this in my clinic space already during group clinic visits, with the establishment of safety, with the nature-inspired clinic rooms, as well as the wellness room. We actually have a room that is labeled wellness. Mm-hmm. And ultimately from an expansive retreat experience. And that's part of why connection matters almost as much as quiet does. And that's what we're bringing to Connect in Nature. It's not just time outdoors. There's space mentally and physically and spiritually designed to support our curiosity alone, but also in community. It also helps to cultivate creativity, clarity, and connection with others, yourself, and with nature. And there's so much nature during this retreat as well. The other aspect that the community at Connect in Nature helps foster is that everyone feels supported to explore, perhaps be nudged out of their comfort zone, even if they so choose it. Ultimately, when you commit and invest in an experience that can help cultivate curiosity and creativity through this protected spaciousness, it brings you out of your daily routine. And there's definitely less pressure because the schedule for the retreat has already been set up by Jessie and I. So there is less pressure. And there's also going to be the invitation for you to put away your watches, because we will keep track of time for you.
I love it. So clarity and creativity and curiosity all show up really when there's more room, not more thinking. And that's what you described. We create space at Connect in Nature. In fact, I create space at all my retreats, much more space than we're used to. Space outside, being outside creates space. But so many of us think that clarity and creativity and curiosity come when we think hard and we try to solve the problem. And yet it comes when there's space and room. And so retreats are really, truly a real world example of exactly what you would create, causes and conditions for curiosity, also clarity, creativity, and connection. I'm putting all the C's together because it's fun, but also because those are all very intertwined. Curiosity gives you clarity. It allows you to be creative. It allows you to make connection and have deep connections with others. But connection also begets more connection, and it begets more curiosity and more clarity and more creativity. That's the power of being in community, whether it's practicing yoga, whether it's at a retreat, whether it's in a small group. It's pretty magical. And so I also want to allude to this idea of stepping out of creativity mode, because we think we have to assign ourselves the task of being curious and solving a problem to be curious. And curiosity is much more of the hands wide open, asking good questions, maybe even strategic questions, but not overthought questions. Just letting things be light is what curiosity looks like. And so giving yourself space to step out of productivity and solving, fixing mode on purpose. That's the design of retreats. And there's another piece of this design that comes up in all the retreats I offer, and it comes up in coaching, and it's specifically designed to enhance curiosity and anything else you want to grow. And so when you focus on what you're good at and the things that foster curiosity, like we talked about today, that's a strengths-based approach. And retreats are really based on this idea of focusing on what you're good at, what you love, the conditions that grow the things that you want to grow more of, rather than focusing on fixing and solving and reacting. And in a space where you're really focusing on strengths-based learning, that's where you actually foster more and more curiosity. And you have more energy, and you're much more able to solve problems without even realizing you're solving problems, because you're coming from a place of interest rather than deficit or criticism. And you're shifting into a more observational state rather than what do I need to fix or self-correction. And all of this usually energizes you, which is interesting that energizing is what I feel when I feel curious, but it conserves energy. You're not wasting energy being judgmental. You're not wasting energy telling yourself what you could do better. You're focusing on what you're good at and leaning into that. And you're focusing on putting yourself in these optimal conditions that really help you. So I think it's a really powerful, different shift of the way that you think about it. And it absolutely takes practice. What we practice grows. So the more we practice curiosity and the more we put ourselves in these optimal environments, physiologically, emotionally, and I guess the word is environmentally, the more curious we will all be.
Now, the ways that we can practice can be small and incremental. We can incorporate causes and conditions that help to optimize our curiosity every day, even as soon as you finish this podcast. So we've already mentioned a lot of it, and we're just going to put it into a list for you. So think about incorporating some of these into your day-to-day life. So intentionally create more white space, like schedule your white space as you would schedule a doctor's appointment. Reduce pressure, like notably, especially time pressure when you're able to. Spend time in nature. Choose community that specifically explores and supports exploration. And then letting things be imperfect. Asking good questions. We've talked about that before. So perhaps a more helpful question is, what am I curious about? instead of what should I do? Or what do others want me to do? Noticing what gives you energy, spending time with people who widen and expand your thinking. Choose a small creative experiment, lots of different ideas we've already mentioned, and then giving yourself permission to let something be unfinished. Again, curiosity definitely grows through practice, through repeated conditions, and not necessarily just one big breakthrough.
So, a few reflection questions as we near the end of this episode. What conditions help curiosity grow for you?
What shuts it down most quickly for you?
Where do you feel more open and more creative?
What role do nature and community play in your own clarity and creativity?
Where might less pressure help more curiosity show up?
What strengths in you might be asking for more room right now?
Curiosity is not random. When you understand the conditions that support it, you can start creating more of them and more of it. This is what Ni-Cheng and I build at Connect in Nature, and what I build at Nicasio Creek Farm Retreats, and also in coaching spaces, environments that specifically help you slow down, notice what's happening, and reconnect with curiosity, connection, clarity, community. Whether you join us or not, we encourage you to get curious about curiosity. Notice what helps it grow, notice what gets in the way, and practice it, because what you practice grows.
If you know someone who needs to hear this episode, perhaps the colleague who keeps saying that he or she just needs some space to think, the friend who can't remember the last time that she did something just for herself or something that she was interested in, then please send them this episode. Share and leave us some stars and reviews. It helps others find us. Links to join us in all of the different offerings that we mentioned are in the show notes. You can feel free to reach out to us by email. And for those of you who are already on mailing lists, you can feel free to just simply respond to that.
Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening. If our message resonates, we'd love to connect further. Join us for coaching, mindfulness experiences, workshops, and retreats. Invite us to speak at your institution or conference. When you work with us, you don't just consume information, you create real change. Find Ni-Cheng Liang at Awakened Breath and Jessie Mahoney at Pause and Presence. Welcome to this mindful moment offering, inviting you to bring your hands out in front of your chest with your fists clenched. Noticing the tension of all of the fingers flexed and constricted, the lack of space, the discomfort perhaps of this tension that's here. And noticing if you are already labeling this experience as unpleasant or odd or anything else. And then next, relaxing open your fists into palms. Palms wide open, fingers extended, seemingly holding up nothing and yet everything, like the surrounding air. Are you able to use this palms wide open analogy towards helping you cultivate curiosity? Can you get curious with palms wide open, dropping judgment, dropping the need to hold on to something with so much tension, but relaxing into providing the spaciousness needed to observe and wonder and experience. And as you're ready, bringing your hands, your palms back into your lap, taking a moment to drop your shoulders, perhaps closing your eyes, letting that spaciousness grow between your ears and your shoulders. Maybe first bringing up your shoulders up to the ears and then sliding your shoulder blades down towards back pockets, allowing for the spaciousness to exist here right now. I hope that you can take the palms wide open approach as you explore and expand through your curiosity. And with that, blinking open eyes, letting the light back in. Thanks so much for practicing with me.